Welcome to another review from the Four Corners of the Board with your host, Graeme Anderson. Hello everyone, this is Graeme Anderson from Four Corners of the Board, and I just want to reiterate the warning that the game I'm going to be reviewing, in my opinion, is not a family-friendly game. And that game is Lobotomy from Titan Forge Games. Now, I do like a good horror game on the PC, so when I saw this game, I was intrigued by it. But normally, horror board games leave me feeling a little flat. Now, this is a game that takes place in a psychiatric hospital, and you're a mental patient in there. I thought, that sounds interesting, but will it hold up? Let's get to the table, see how it's played, and we'll come back with my final thoughts on Lobotomy from Titan Forge Games. So here we have the game all set up, and before I start I did want to let you know that I will not be going through all the rules, nor will I be showing you all the components. Since it is scenario based, I don't want to give anything away. There are different decks of cards around the table. There's mental disorder cards, equipment cards, and monster movement cards, and I'll talk about them when they come up in the gameplay. Now to start the game you'll need to decide on a difficulty. The higher the difficulty, the more scenarios you'll need to play. Now we're just going to start with one scenario for this walkthrough, and whichever way you're going to play, you're going to be selecting a random scenario either from the book or from a deck of cards which you can use to help randomize. And you're going to be setting up the game as described. If you use the cards, you'll have to refer back to the book to find out more details about it. Now you always start with a central tile, and that will also determine your starting point and designate the surrounding tiles as A, B, C, and D for later placement of random elements. Now you're going to cover all the cabinets, doors, and body markers on the game board with the appropriate random tokens. You're also going to place 2 memory tokens in each quadrant. Each time you need to randomly place something on the game board, you're going to be rolling a D12 and a D4 and place it on the indicated space. So the D4 die will represent the quadrant, so 1, 2, 3, and 4, or A, B, C, and D, and D12 is for the space. Next, every scenario will start with a number of basic monsters. You have patients, nurses, and scavengers, and the nurses will be determined by the player count. And you're going to be placing these randomly. I'll talk more about the monsters during gameplay. Finally, you'll follow any specific instructions from the scenario that you've picked. Once the board is set up, each player will receive a character card. And here are some character cards as an example. And whichever character card you take, you will take also all the appropriate pieces. The character card, the mini, 4 basic skill cards, and their memory cards. You will also take 2 of the basic skill cards as your starting abilities, as well as any starting equipment from the equipment deck. Finally, you'll draw 1 mental disorder card from each deck listed on your character card, and pick one, and you're going to discard the rest of them. Then, you're going to place your mini on one of the starting squares. And you'll also receive markers to track various things during the game. So let's have a quick look at your character card. It lists several pieces of information. There's your picture, name, and bio, all of which really do not affect the gameplay. Next, there are action points, and that is how many actions you can perform on your turn. Health, when you take this much damage, you need to respawn in the middle of the board game. There's the attack rating, which is the minimum you must roll on a d6 to do damage. Defense, the amount of damage a character can absorb from each attack, and finally your imagination, and this is used for various tests during the game, such as searching or unlocking doors. You'll also have a special ability listed across the bottom of the card, and located on the right hand side of your card are your starting mental disorders and your starting equipment as mentioned earlier. Finally, you have an insanity track, which you can spend insanity from to perform special actions, which I'll get around to explaining during the gameplay. Now once everything is set up, you're ready to play. The game is split into 2 phases per round. The first is the player's phase, which they will take their turn, then the monsters will take a turn. Now there is a built-in timer to that game, and that is the warden figure shown here. He will always start on A1, and during the monster phase, he has a chance to move. He does not move on every monster phase. On a player's turn, they will first cool down any skills they have previously used, and I'll get to talk about skills in a little bit. Once that's done, the player can perform as many actions as listed on their character card. For each action point spent, the players can move 1 space in any direction, search a locker or body, reveal a door token, pick up a memory token, attack with a skill, weapon, or fists, Use a skill or inventory item, although these may cost more than 1 action point or no action points at all. You can trade with another character on your same square, or you can interact with a scenario-based objective. The other possibility that you can do on your turn is actually spend all your action points to do a running action. Now, if you decide to do that, you will get 2 additional action points, but all your action points must be used for movement. Now, movement uses the same standard movement rules. You can only move into adjacent space as long as it's not blocked by walls, doors, or other visible objects. And in Lobotomy, walls are designated by a double white line, and individual spaces are differentiated by a single white line. You can also not leave a space if there's a monster in the same space as you. Now, searching a locker or body is pretty much the same thing. For a body, you're going to flip it over and take the card from the appropriate deck. Now, for cabinets, you need to perform a search test. First, you're going to look at your imagination and roll that many d6s. Each 4, 5, and 6 is a success. This will give you the number of successes you essentially have to spend while looking in that cabinet. So if I look at this roll here, I've rolled 5 successes. I can buy an equipment card or 1 medicine and 1 equipment card. You can never buy more than 1 of each type of card per search. If there's a monster symbol on the cabinet, and if you fail to get enough successes to buy anything, the monster will spawn instead. When you come across an unrevealed door, you can try and open it. Now, there are 3 types of doors. Open, which are just removed and you're free to continue moving through the space. Barricaded doors, you'll either have to spend weapon durability or action points to place damage markers on the door until there are enough damage points on the door to match or exceed the barricade value. The last type of door is locked, which will of course have a lock value on it. You'll need to roll a number of d6s equal to your imagination, and getting enough successes to beat a value. And again, 4, 5s, and 6s are successes. If you come across a memory token, you can remove it from the board and draw a card from your personal memory deck. Read the card and do what it says, and your deck is split 50-50. 5 of them are good, and 5 of them are bad. Once you've completed the card, most of the time you're just going to place it next to your character, and when you have 2 of these cards, you can actually trade them in for an additional basic skill card. Now, I'm going to leave combat until the monster's turn. I want to finish off the rest of the actions that a player can do. So let's talk about skills. Now, each skill card will have a cost to it, usually a number of action points the player needs to spend, the action the card does, and the cooldown track. When you use a skill, you're going to place a marker in the topmost circle, and you cannot use that skill again until the marker is off. The markers move down at the start of every turn, and each time you kill a monster. So as I said before, at the beginning of everybody's turn, you're going to cool down all of your skills. This is what it means. You're going to be moving this marker down 1 space. Now, I've glossed over and skipped over many things related to a player's turn, such as items and inventory and weapons and drugs, but I want to move on to the monster's turn. Now, the monster's turn is fairly straightforward. You're going to reveal the top movement card from the deck and follow it from top to bottom. First, there is the description and the event. Now, if there are any scenario-specific actions that happen, these stars will trigger them. There are 3 different colors of stars, green, blue, and red, and the scenario will tell what happens when each of these appear. Next, if there is a brain icon here, you'll randomly seed a new memory marker on the board. Then, if there's a warden movement icon, the warden will move to the next numbered space on the board. If the warden ever reaches the final space, which is space 12, the scenario will go into final clash mode. You are then going to move all the monsters, and they will go towards the closest character using the monster's movement from their card and the basic line of sight rules. Monsters follow basically the same type of movement as the players, with the exception of doors. Any unrevealed door does not block a monster, but a revealed, blocked, or barricaded door, which has not been opened by the players yet, will block the monster. Finally, the movement card will show you which monsters to spawn. For each monster shown, you will randomly place them on the board, again using the D4 and D12. Once the movement card is complete, any monster in a space with a character will attack it. Now, before I get into combat, let's have a quick look at the monster card. You'll see that they'll have the same type of stats as the character. Action points, health, attack rating, and defense, and they all work the same way as the character. They can also have some special abilities or special attacks, and anything that is special about the monster will be listed on the monster card. So let's quickly talk about combat. It works basically the same way if a character is attacking a monster or a monster is attacking a character. You're going to choose a target, choose how they will attack, and if it's a character, you can pick a weapon, a skill, or fist to use. On a monster, you're either going to be rolling the number of dice that it lists there, or you may have to pick an attack mode that the monster is going to do, and that will usually have a die roll associated with it. So you'd roll a d6 first, then you're going to look at the resulting line, and then perform that attack action. Once you know what you're attacking with, you're then going to roll the number of d6s equal to the weapon or skill or whatever that you're using and count the successes. Now you're going to look at the character's or monster's attack rating to find out what a success is. Now usually the lower the attack rating, the easier they can hit. You're going to check for any special effects from the weapon or skill, such as an area attack or frost or fire, and once you have the number of successes, you reduce the number of successes by the defender's defense value. Any damage that's left over will then be applied to the monster or the character. If you as a player ever deal the final blow to a monster, you can cool down one of your skills by 1 step. Now, if a character ever dies during combat, you'll move the character back to one of the starting points. You're going to recover all the health, you're going to recover 2 insanity points, all the equipment will lose 1 durability, but the warden will also move 3 times on his track. If you die during the final clash, death is permanent. Finally, I want to quickly mention your insanity track. Your insanity track can be spent when you're attacking to roll an extra white die, as shown here, which will give you either additional hits, or it can actually reduce your attack rating by 1. If you are defending, you can also spend an insanity point to actually roll an additional white defense die, which will give you more defense. Now finally, the players will win the scenario if they are able to complete all the objectives before the warden reaches the 11th space of the final tile. If the warden reaches the 12th space, the players can still win, but the game now goes into final clash mode. The warden is placed in the pentagram in the middle of the game board and now acts like any other monster on the board. This game still consists of the player's turn and the monster's turn, but the only way to win now is to defeat the warden. Any character killed during this phase of the game is permanently dead and out of the game. If the players can defeat the warden, they win. Otherwise, if the players are killed, the game is over. And that's the basics of Lobotomy, and I have skipped over much during my rules overview. But hopefully I have given you enough to show you how this game is played. So let's get back to the table to hear my final thoughts on Lobotomy.
Well, what did I think about Lobotomy? First, I want to address some things I found frustrating with the game. One of them is this, the rulebook. This rulebook is disorganized, it doesn't make sense how it's laid out, there's no index to it, and having to flip back and forth between the scenarios which are located at the back and the rules just makes it frustrating. The scenarios you need to keep open because you need to know what the stars do when there's a monster movement card, but also you need to know how to open up a door. Well, the doors are kind of placed randomly in the book. They don't seem to be any sense of how it's organized. So you'll have searching, searching a dead body, searching a cabinet, then a piece on death, what happens in combat, all the different combat rules, and then you have how to open up a door. Why they didn't put all the player actions together, I don't know. But I can tell you, it is completely playable with this rulebook. You don't need anything else. It's just a bit frustrating to go through. So I don't want people to think that, if you get the game, you can't play it. You definitely can play it, just the rules need some help. That being said, I believe the person that wrote those rules has also done a new version on Board Game Geek, where you can go download like a new rule set, which is actually separated out the scenarios from the rules and kind of tightened up and clarified some of the rules. And the scenarios now are like 1-pagers, so you can print everything out. Because you need to have these scenarios in front of you, because when you're playing multiple scenarios, each scenario will tell you kind of when a scenario break is. And that scenario break will be, for example, this is not one of the scenarios, but let's say you had to collect 3 buckets. You have to collect 3 buckets and take them all back to the central pentagram. Now the break could be, after you've collected the 3rd bucket, you can start the next scenario. So you can technically have 2 scenarios going on at the same time, and each scenario will tell you when that scenario break is. You also need to know what happens when the stars they come up. So it's important to have the scenarios kind of in front of you, and when everything is one book, having to flip back and forth is just frustrating. The next frustrating thing is the actual boards themselves. So here we have a board, and the rule books tell you to place the body tokens on the board on the designated locations. So if we just kind of take this board here, you can probably see that there are no body locations whatsoever. That's because they're not printed on the board. So no big deal, randomize where the bodies go. A little frustrating, but it's doable. The other thing is where the doors go. So actually, if we turn it this way, you can probably see that right here, there is a little white outline around a door. That means that you put a door token there, And if we move it a little further this way, there's a little white outline here which shows where the cabinet goes. Very hard to see. So that's a door. Well, what about this one? There's definitely, it looks like a door, but there's no white outline. So is that a door or is that not a door? So it's little things like that which I found frustrating with the game. They don't break the game. You just make a house rule on whether that's a door or not. And again, the good thing is on Board Game Geek, someone has taken the time to go through all the boards. So you'll see a picture of all the boards. They will show you where all the body icons go. They'll show you where all the doors go. So it makes life a lot easier. Now, I do also want to talk about the theme of the game and the treatment of mental illness. Now, this game, when you read the introductory cover, it says that you are a patient in a psychiatric hospital and you see your fellow inmates and the medical staff as horrendous monsters or horrendous abominations. And during the gameplay, you're killing the monsters that you see. So you're in an institution with medical staff and patients who are innocents, and the gameplay has you kill them. Now that is an interesting theme. I can say that in the least, and it's something that you can completely ignore. You can just basically not read that introductory page and play the game just fine. But it is there, and that is the theme of the game. Also, the treatment of mental illness in the game is treated very, not exactly lightheartedly, but you want to get more mental illness. The mental illness cards or mental disorder cards at the beginning of the game, like the phobias and aggression and all that, they're useful skills. I mean, you need them throughout the game to make your scenarios easier to complete. And you also can spend insanity, so you can make yourself more insane to either protect yourself or attack stronger, which is those white dice that I was talking about in the walkthrough. So it doesn't really doesn't treat the mental disorders in a realistic way. But again, it's a game mechanism, and if you can get over it, that's fine. Now, as for the gameplay itself, I was expecting something like Zombicide. What you get is a lot slower, more methodical gameplay. It requires a lot more cooperation from all the players, which I really enjoyed. You can have a lone wolf kind of going off on their own because they will die, and then the warden moves, and it's just a disaster when someone dies. It doesn't end the game, but it definitely makes the game easier. So everybody has to be making sure that they're using their character skills as efficiently and as well as possible, which I really enjoyed. It requires a lot of talking. And then the combat itself was fairly straightforward, as you saw through the walkthrough. But it is an interesting mechanism. So overall, I'm giving this a huge thumbs up. I have really, really enjoyed my playthrough of Lobotomy, but understand the theme, the treatment of mental disorder, and there is some blood on the board, and there is some can be some very disturbing cards that you have to read. So you have to know that going into it. But if it still sounds interesting to you, and remember this is not a family-friendly game, but if it does sound interesting to you, I would highly encourage you to try Lobotomy. I'm having a blast playing it. And honestly, that's it for now. So again, thanks for watching.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.